Hey guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Today's video is going to be on the longer side, and there's a lot of things that have happened in the world this week that I did want to mention at the beginning of this video, but just because of how long this video is going to be without doing that, I'm just gonna leave that out. And I think that I might do a video on all of the strange stuff that has happened in the world this week, if you guys would be interested in that. Also, they are testing the fire alarms in my building right now. Obviously, I'm not gonna film through the fire alarm going off. They haven't gone off for a little bit, so I'm hoping that I can just get through this video without having to deal with that. But if they do go off, I will stop filming and start again. So if you can hear them going off for a minute or whatever in a video, the building's not burning down. Also, if I sound a little bit nasally, I am still sick. I can't kick this cold. I don't know what's going on. But with that all being said, let's get right into today's video so that we're not sitting here for 4 hours. So today we are going to be discussing the Hinsdale house, and this topic was suggested to me by one of you guys, and after starting to do some research into this case really interested me. I think this is one of the most interesting paranormal cases I have ever come across. So I really hope that this is something that I can give to you guys that you haven't heard before, and that you guys will be just as interested in it as I am. I'm really excited to share it with you. The Hinsdale house, also known as the Dandy House, is located at 3830 McMahon Road in Hinsdale, New York, and is said to be the most famous and one of the most haunted houses in New York. For the purpose of today's video, we are going to be picking up when the Dandy family moved into the home in the 1970s. And when they came across this home, they really thought that they had found the perfect place for their family to live. This was their dream home, and they were so excited to move in. Just like so many other cases start. That's the start of so many paranormal cases. But yeah, they were really looking forward to moving into this home, and it was their dream home, or so they thought. The Dandy family consisted of Clara Dandy, her husband Phil Dandy, and their children Mike, Beth, Laura, and Mary. Overall, this family was said to be a fairly normal family, and they were also said to be generally happy. They all got along. There was really nothing out of the ordinary about this family at all. The reason that the Dandys decided to move to the Hinsdale house was because they really wanted to get out of the city and move to a house that was surrounded more by nature. And if you look at the Hinsdale house, it is surrounded by lots of nature. There's a lot of trails around there and things like that. So the point of them moving there was they thought this would give them a better life. They thought this would give them more time to spend together. They could be outside more, and they really thought that this was just going to add to their happiness. Strange activity that would take place in the Hinsdale house started even before the Dandy family moved in. While they were moving the items from their old house in the city to their new house, they started to experience a lot of car trouble. So much to the point that they ended up actually getting rid of that car and just chalking it up to the fact that the car was older. But they would continue to experience car trouble throughout the time that they lived in the Hinsdale house. Going through articles online, it is often said that all of the strangeness started with these really weird phone calls that the Dandy family started to receive after moving into the Hinsdale house. However, if you do a deeper dive, you can find that this wasn't actually the start of the activity. They started to experience really strange stuff right off the bat, and the phone calls started to take place a little bit later on, and we will come back to talk about those in a little. So on the day that the Dandy family were set to move into the Hinsdale house, when they arrived, they found that the home was completely infested with bees. And this wasn't just like a couple bees here and there. There were so many bees within the home, you couldn't see in or out of any of the windows because there were bees just caked onto these windows and the surfaces so thickly that you couldn't see out of them. The family couldn't recall seeing absolutely any bees on their previous visits to the home, but they called in the exterminator, and to make things even stranger, the exterminator said that this was very strange behavior for bees, and it was especially strange for this time of year. But he sprayed, and obviously a lot of the bees did end up dying, and it kind of fixed the problem a little bit, but the bee problem really did never stop. And people who have visited the home even now say that there is bees and like flies and things like that all over the inside of the house and the outside. The Dandy family was known to have a lot of pets, dogs, cats, anything that you can imagine. They really just liked animals, and this property gave them more space to have more animals. And a lot of the strangeness that was happening did involve their pets. On one occasion, their dog completely went missing. They never found it. But none of these things were paranormal, or they didn't think that they were paranormal, so they just kind of dismissed them. But there were a lot of things similar to this that happened right away as soon as the family moved in. Several times after moving in, the kids would come to their parents and tell them about all of this strange stuff that they were experiencing. But Phil and Clara just dismissed this as their child's wild imaginations. Like, that also happens in so many cases. But they weren't really chalking any of this up to paranormal activity yet, like I had mentioned with the other stuff they were experiencing. Family also had some experiences with UFOs. Clara was bringing water in to use for baths and cooking one night when she saw something in the sky, and whatever it was moving very quickly but not making any sound. She called the kids out and they all started staring at this object, wondering what exactly it was because it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The object was described as being very large with no windows, and while watching the object, they said it seemed to just vanish. After this encounter and seeing this object the first time, the children started to report seeing these similar objects that looked like the one that they had seen with their mom over top of their house several more times. So they've seen this over their house like countless times, and it just seems like all of these things that were happening around this property in general are just insane. And these strange activities would just continue to escalate. Like I said, there were these strange phone calls that the family would receive, and when they answered, the person on the other end wouldn't say absolutely anything. You could hear them breathing, or they would just make very strange noises. Now, there was never any explanation for these phone calls, but I do have to say this is also very, very creepy. One day, Clara would return home from work to find her children absolutely frantic, telling her that they believed that somebody had broken into their home. Clara had a hard time believing this because at the time they had 3 very large dogs that she just didn't think would allow this to happen. However, when she got into the home, she did find that the home seemed to be ransacked. However, what was weird about this is that it was only the girls' stuff that was thrown everywhere. Mike's stuff and Phil's stuff hadn't been touched at all. As this was happening, why the family didn't decide to move away is beyond me. However, I know sometimes financial situations don't allow that, and you know, there's a lot of factors that could have been playing into this, but I don't think anything would be worth living in a house that was this haunted. But the family was determined to make this living situation work, so they remained living there. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but I'm just going to mention again right now for context, is while living in the Hinsdale house, the family and people who visited the family experienced a lot of car trouble. This included, you know, the cars breaking down, having issues with the car in general, and car accidents. And this was all ended up being believed to be linked to the home. This next experience that I'm going to share with you is definitely one of the creepier ones that I read about that this family experienced. Like, if I ever experienced this, I would literally cry. So prepare yourself. So like I previously mentioned, the Hinsdale house is surrounded by nature and like this foresty area. So much so that there is like a hill, and above the hill, or I guess like on top of the hill, there are campgrounds that are usually only used once the weather warms up. Side note, the campgrounds that are located above the Hinsdale house once did belong to the Hinsdale house. However, obviously they didn't anymore. But anyways, Clara took one of the family dogs one day and decided to walk up to where the campgrounds were located and just kind of look around. While walking, suddenly the family dog seemed to be really startled and didn't want to walk anymore. And that is when Clara started to notice that there was this weird music coming from all around her. She described this music as kind of sounding similar to that of choir practice. Clara decided to try and follow where this music was coming from. She wanted to see what this was all about, you know, if there was a group up there practicing singing. And she did say that once the singing started, she had this really creepy feeling, like the music was very unsettling. And she walked for a little bit, but once she started to get closer, or how it sounded like she was getting closer, the music just completely stopped. Then they turned around, started to head home back to the bottom of the hill, and the music started up again. And she said this time the music sounded much more to her like the Gregorian chant. Next time Clara decided to go for a walk in that area, she took her daughters with her, as well as the neighbor and all 3 of the family dogs. Weirdly enough, when they reached that point in the forest where she had reached the first time, the singing started again, then it completely stopped, and then when they turned around and started to head towards home, the singing started up again, just like the first time. The only thing is different about this time than the time that Clara was by herself is after the music had started again, this time it was one man who sounded like he was saying this monotone prayer, and it was much creepier to them than the chant itself. Clara said that it was so beyond creepy, so after hearing this, they just turned around and sped home. When they got home, the younger girls and Clara told Mike about what they had heard while hiking up the hill, and he decided that him and his friend wanted to go check it out for themselves. However, they had a little bit of a different experience. Once they got to that point in the hill where his mom and his sisters had told him they had heard this chanting, they heard this woman scream as if she was in some kind of trouble. They were both absolutely terrified, Mike and his friend, and they turned around and took off back home as well. And after this, the family just decided to stay away from this area altogether. The thing about this, however, is the Dandy family weren't the only ones who heard this chanting coming from the hills. A lot of the locals who lived in that area would talk about this strange singing that came from the top of the hills late at night. Like, how freaking creepy is that? At the time on the property, there was also a lot of ghostly activity going on and paranormal activity. On one occasion, or multiple occasions, while the family was trying to sleep, they could hear people walking around the house at all hours of the night in what sounded like steel-toe boots. You know, lights would come on when they weren't supposed to. Doors would be open that weren't having any reason to be left open. You could hear people in the kitchen. Just all of this really strange stuff that they chalked up later on to go. Because of the activity in the home, the family had decided that they were going to call in a priest to bless the property. A man by the name of Father Bob came down and he did bless the property, but it seemed that whatever was haunting the home was very irritated by this, because it seemed after this priest came and blessed the home, the activity on the property would only escalate. I just need to clarify, there was so much paranormal activity and so many things that had happened in this home that I couldn't possibly cover every single thing. So I do highly recommend that you go and research this on your own, or read the book that I'm going to link in the description and I'll mention at the end of the video. So I'm kind of jumping all over the place here because I can't talk about every single thing that happened, but because there was just so much. With the extremely messed up things that were going on in the home, they decided that they needed to get an exorcism done on the house. The priest that they had come to perform the exorcism was a man by the name of Alphonsus Troybolt, who also worked on some stuff to do with the Amityville horror house, strangely enough. The room that was believed to have the most paranormal activity going on in it was one of the daughter's rooms that was also dubbed as a guest room, and the daughter experienced a lot of stuff while staying in this room, and so did several of the guests who had stayed in that room as well. The bedroom that was said to be really bad was a bedroom located on the second floor, which was also supposed to be one of the daughter's bedrooms, but due to the bad feeling in this room, the room had remained empty. 3 of the family pets had passed away in this room with no explanation. And after hearing this, the vet actually advised the family to stop letting their animals go into that room. Suddenly, the youngest daughter, Laura, started to behave really strangely. She started to accuse people of very messed up, nasty things. She would say really alarming, creepy things all the time, and her behavior was just not the same as it once was. The family had a psychic come down and visit the home, who told the family that he believed that the house was having a really negative effect on Laura, and advised the family to get her out of the house, which the family did take this advice, and they moved Laura out of this home, and she moved in with Clara's parents for a short period of time, along with Mary, I believe. So they sent the 2 youngest daughters, Mary and Laura, to stay with Clara's parents in Buffalo, but this couldn't last because when they moved in with Clara's parents, it was summer, but summer was coming to an end and the girls had to return back to school, meaning that they would have to return back to the Hinsdale house. Once returning to the home, Laura started to complain that she was being tormented by these unseen beings. Father Alphonsus came to the home. He started blessing the home and saying prayers in hopes that this would help. It hadn't done much, and so he would visit the home more often, trying to help the family out. Believed at this point that the home was being haunted by a family that included a husband, a wife, their son, and a grandma. And it was obvious they didn't want the Dandy family to be there. Everything really started to hit the fan. One of the common spirits that was seen a lot by the children was a woman. She was often seen in like a white dress and had flowy hair, and she was seen on the property several times by not only the children but their friends as well. One day in September, while Phil was home from work, he was working a lot, and that's why he hasn't been mentioned much in the story. He was away for work a lot. But on this particular day, he was home for work and the whole family would experience something absolutely life-changing. He had been told little bits about what his family was experiencing and what they were going through, but he had never experienced anything of his own. While home this day, he felt compelled to walk down to the tree line that surrounded the property, and so he decided that he was going to check this area out, and Clara went with him. While walking back to the home, that is when Clara noticed that there was a figure in Beth's room that was not one of her children or anybody who should have been in her house. It wasn't anybody that she recognized at all. Clara was noticing this. Beth and her boyfriend began to approach her parents, and they told their parents that while they were sitting on the front porch, they saw a person sprint past them and they didn't know who it was. Phil at this point thought that somebody was messing with the family, but things just began to escalate worse and worse, and at this point they could hear a Mary screaming from the back of the property. Mary was now freaking out because she could see somebody looking at her from her very own bedroom window, and again, it was nobody that she had recognized, and Beth had also seen this person. So after seeing all of this and noticing that something wasn't right, the family decided to go into the house and see who these people were and why they were in their home. When they got inside the house, they found that the home was completely in disarray. All of the lights that were previously turned off had now been turned on. There was a door that they kept locked and bolted to a cellar that was now flung open, which they had not opened for any reason ever up until this point. And while inside, they all of a sudden saw what appeared to be a man standing on their front lawn. So all of this really crazy stuff was happening. So they called Father Alphonsus to the home again because everything was getting really out of control at this point and the activity was just absolutely skyrocketing. So when Father Alphonsus arrived at the home, he brought a man with him by the name of Alex. And Alex told Clara that he believed that the home was being haunted by a lot of people who had been murdered on the property, which would line up with all of these spirits that the family was in fact seeing. This night, Father Alphonsus would decide to hold a second exorcism in the home, where all of the family and Alex and Father Alphonsus gathered in the living room and they all held hands while Father Alphonsus performed this exorcism. The thing I guess that was done during this exorcism is that Alex would take in all of the negative energy that was coming from within the home and I guess kind of like dispose of it. Father Alphonsus read the church's exorcism rites. While this was going on, those present could hear these loud and bone-chilling screams coming from outside of the home. Emily did believe at first that this exorcism on the house did work because this was the quietest the house had been for months, since the first time that they had ever moved in. But that wouldn't last long before the family would start being tormented by these unseen things yet again. One of the more notable experiences that was had during this time is Phil had come home when nobody else was there and he quite literally saw a book floating in midair, which is crazy. I can't even imagine seeing that. Like, how do you react to something like that? Clara also started to experience these spells of paralysis where she couldn't move or speak at all. At this point, the family had considered selling the home. However, everybody in the neighborhood had already known what was going on and they didn't really want to trick anybody into buying the home, so the family was really struggling. At this point, due to the horrors that were taking place in the home, the only people that were still living there were Phil and Clara. And on October 17th, 1974, Phil and Clara got into their vehicle and left the home for good. Several people have moved into the Hinsdale house since the Dandy family had lived there, but none of them have lasted more than a couple months. And it did seem that there were several people who lived there before the Dandys, and most of them hadn't lived there for very long either, and a lot of them had also called for priests to come and visit the home, suggesting that the house had always been haunted like this. Definitely one of the craziest paranormal cases I've ever covered. If you guys want more on this case, Clara Miller, maiden name of Clara Dandy, has a book called Echoes of a Haunting, and I'll try and link it down below for you guys. Theories of what caused this home to be haunted. Some believe that several people had been murdered and buried on the site. Some believe there are a shaman burial ground above the home in the woods where that chanting came from, or both could be a possibility. But I do think that something definitely happened within this home to make it such a prevalent place for haunting and spirits and anything of the paranormal. I mean, they were seeing UFOs too, like it's just so crazy. The last people to actually live in the Hinsdale house was a couple, Joe and Florence Misnick, and both of them ended up passing away in the home just due to old age, like natural causes. But they were the first people to live in the home that didn't experience any paranormal activity. However, some people believe that they made a deal with the spirits and that's why they pretty much just left them alone. Named Daniel Clays bought the house in 2015 and he doesn't live there, but he allows paranormal investigators to visit the home, and Daniel believes that the home is haunted and has had several experiences of his own within the house. I think that this case is so crazy and there are so many people who back up the family stories and whatnot that you almost can't deny the fact that there is something haunting this house or several things haunting it, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing to me. But guys, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.